For the longest of time, I've been toying with the idea of getting solar panels and battery storage. Not to save the planet, but to put money back in my pocket. And if that ends up being good for the environment, then you can't really say fairer than that. But I've been a bit lost with this type of technology because there's so many variants of panels, different outputs, different styles, different manufacturers. There's different circuits you can use and even different electrical currents for systems. I'd have an easier time trying to understand Chinese. And let's point out the elephant in the room straight away. Solar seems to be a rather expensive technology, and then to top it all off, I have a ton of doubts about it. Is it actually a viable investment to save you money? Can you actually generate enough power living in Wales, a country so rainy that people can live their entire lives without ever having seen the sun? Well, today's episode of STU'S Reviews will be slightly different as you follow me on my journey trying to make sense of it all. So join me as I make some shocking discoveries, mostly whilst in my pyjamas and dressing gown. I'll also wear some clothes and sit down with the owner of a solar installation company and ask the hard questions that no one is asking. Did we really land on the moon? And finally, I'll make a decision that turned out to be a rather expensive mistake.
I don't think that's supposed to happen. Okay.
But to start off, let me take you back to late last year when I received the most expensive electricity bill that I've ever had in my life. Mate, we've just had the electricity bill. Come and have a look at this. So for the month of November to December, it was £748 and 23 pence. I'm going to have to sell one of the kids. This is insane. The UK has some of the most expensive electricity in Europe. It's 3 times the price of Sweden, for Christ's sake. And then on top of that, the idiot in Parliament decides to slap on a tax on top of it, passing on even further costs to consumers. It's just getting out of hand. £748. Next month, I'm going to be doing shadow puppets on the wall for entertainment and sat huddling around an open fire in the middle of my room just to stay warm. That is unbelievable and eye-wateringly high. I need a stiff drink. That very evening, with a sore bottom from the hand of the energy barons reaching deep into my pockets, I decided to start my research and began Googling the hell out of solar panels. What systems were the best? Would they work on a southeast facing roof? How long do they last for? How many panels would I need, and could I do it myself? But most importantly, how much would it cost me? Now, it was at that point that I'd hit a dead end, because every single website I went on would either offer me a wildly random estimate between 2 numbers, and we all know that it'll be higher than the higher of the two, or alternatively, they would flat out refuse to give me a quotation unless I spoke to a real human being. And because I'm a millennial and we're all secretly raging hermits, speaking to a real person is the last thing I wanted to do. So I continued on with my reading, just trying to make sense of what I thought at the time was a particularly complicated subject with more questions than answers, until I came across one particular website. It was as if I'd found the Holy Grail, because almost all of my questions were answered with one simple tool. I'd managed to stumble across a solar panel installer that almost lets you see behind the curtain, so to speak, because they actually give you access to software where you can input your current electric usage, type in your postcode, and then go through a few selections, map your own roof using satellite imagery. They then calculate how many panels can fit onto your roof space, telling you an estimate quotation for that, alongside giving you a percentage that they think you can save on your electricity bill. This is all without inputting any of my personal details, no cold calls, no having to speak to anyone. I could be a hermit and get many of my questions answered without having to even look away from my laptop. And the most important thing was that I had a price, an accurate quotation of what it would cost me for a solar panel system. And it was more than I'd hoped, but less than I'd anticipated. And not so much that I wasn't at least intrigued, but there were still many unanswered questions. So that night, instead of sleeping, those questions were running around on repeat. Was it possible to recoup an investment? If I could make my money back, how long would it take to do so? Would I be old, infirm, and incontinent by the time they paid for themselves? Would they actually last as long as I needed them to last for them to pay off themselves? And all of the information that was given was just an estimate. I still needed the truth. Heatable's quotation certainly looked interesting and gives me an idea about what I might be able to achieve with a solar system of my own. I really like how they let people create and map a system, and how they offered a quotation without having to give them any of my personal details. It means anyone can go on and have a play around with quotations without having some slimy sausage breathing down your neck trying to fish your wallet out of your back pocket. Do you know what? This level of customer service is almost unheard of. And to give them credit where credit's due, Heatable are already making me feel completely comfortable about the whole process of getting solar panels, and especially the benefits. But that's not enough for me. I've still got some questions I need to ask. So I sent them an email last week, and they've said yes, I can ask them face to face. So that's where I'm going today. I'm going to Heatable's office to ask them some particularly hard questions that I'm almost certain will get the door shut in my face. Questions such as, are solar panels just part of a net zero pyramid scheme designed to line the back pockets of Miliband's mate from down the pub? I guess we'll find out shortly. Alright, let's start with the hard one. Are solar panels a money pit? If you're not interested in net zero, can they actually save you money, or are you just setting fire to it?
Solar panels can definitely save you money, and the green agenda, I think most people are considerate of the environment, but actually until it hits their wallets, that's when there's a bit of a mind shift. The beauty of solar is that it will absolutely save you money, not only today, because today's energy prices are not going to be tomorrow's, next year's, 5 years energy prices, but there is value as well in terms of just the property desirability goes up, you're isolated from a volatile energy market, and if you're not consuming that energy on site, you're exporting it. What is really important in the journey is that you have a well-designed system with reasonable equipment of a standard that isn't going to be offline all the time. That's when it doesn't make sense. But if you get the right kit, the right design, absolutely it stacks.
Okay, so you're saying that you can save money, but if I stick that money that I would spend on a 10-panel system into a savings account, I'm going to be getting about 4% a year. So if I'm investing in solar panels, how long will it take before I actually see a return on that investment?
Payback is a constant question that comes from consumers, and different people look at it different ways. The most common thing people talk about payback is my savings are going to pay off my capital outlay. So if I'm going to save £1,000 a year, I've spent £10,000 on a system, it's 10 years, doesn't feel that attractive. We sort of view this a bit different, and lots of clients now view this differently. One of them is, if I've got £10,000 and I put it into an account, let's say a savings account, lock it away for 10 years, you might get 5%. You will pay tax on that 5% as well, because it's taxable income. If you put £10,000 solar system on your roof and that saves you £1,000 a year, that's 10% a year tax free.
Okay, so you're saying that there's a higher rate of return if you get solar panels than if you have a savings account, but could I increase that rate of return if I went and did something DIY and bought some cheaper panels rather than going through you guys?
There are a couple of reasons why I wouldn't recommend DIY. One of them is the warranties. So the manufacturers won't give you a warranty on the kit, the full warranty, unless it's been done by an approved trained installer, because it is complex. So you're spending £7,000 buying a Tesla Powerwall 3. If you've got a 12-month warranty and something goes wrong with it, you're out of pocket by a good amount. The second one is you've got grid compliance. So you need to have approval and notification to the grid supplier, because you're going to be, what you're essentially doing here is with solar and batteries, you're putting a power plant on your roof.
Probably thought about that.
Yeah,
That is right, yeah.
and you want to attach that to a third party owned by someone else grid. So they want to make sure that's been done to standards and done properly. And then the other one's safety. Like, it's complex. You've got big panels which are like sails. You're on a roof, you're climbing on roofs, you've got high voltages, especially on a DC system. If you have 10 panels, that could be 500 volts. And you only need to get one thing wrong and you're in a lot of trouble. So it's more about safety than anything, probably. But secondly, if you did DIY it, trying to get it approved onto the grid and trying to have the backing of a manufacturer for expensive equipment would be a challenge.
Okay, aside from the grid connections that only a certified installer would be able to provide, like you guys, is there anything special about the panels you use, or could you just get cheaper ones?
The panels that we use are from REA have a particular cell technology which is sort of hyper reactive to any light condition. So it's not going to produce like loads of power when it's grey, but it will produce some power, enough to cover the base load generally. Now our panel, or the REA panel, arrives with a microinverter already bonded to the back of it. So you've got generation and conversion in one unit. The panel is optimized for low light, and the microinverter can convert low light energy, whereas a string or a hybrid inverter needs lots of power. So this is all about it's the 1s and 2s, 3% that we can get low end just to get some generation. And with a typical system, you would struggle to do that.
Well, that was a very interesting conversation with Ben, and I feel a lot more knowledgeable about solar panels and the technology and the installation process and generally solar technology as a whole. But I've still got a few questions, and mainly that question is, how much energy will a panel system on my house actually provide me? Is it going to be a worthwhile investment, and how long will it take me to recoup the money that I put into actually buying solar panels? Because they're quite an investment. Let's not beat around the bush. Now, Ben said he'd send me a report in the next couple of days for my house and a 10-panel system. And that report should show me exactly what they'd expect to get at my property. And it's not just a random baseless figure. It's based on all sorts of things, but the most important thing is they take a look at my environment, such as the shade around the house. Are there any trees in the locale that could block the sun? And they also take a look at which direction the house is facing, and then they make that calculation and apply that to my current electricity bill to work out how much I'll save. And now I'm really excited to see this report to find out whether or not it's going to be a viable thing to do. But the only thing is, I've got to wait a couple of days before I get it. So I guess I'll see you back in the studio. Here we are. So I've just had an email from Heatable, and it's the report for what they think is achievable with the system at my house. And it's super interesting. In here, there are a ton of stats and predictions and figures to showcase what the system might be able to achieve in obviously predicted conditions. Now, obviously, there's going to be a billion different factors and variables that will determine exactly how much you're going to be able to generate, and nothing short of having a time machine is going to be able to actually tell you exactly how much you're able to produce. But the report they've sent through is super detailed, and it does give me an idea. Now, if you take a look at this, they've actually calculated the efficiency of the system using the MCS SunPath to simulate obstructions. Now, the areas in red are shaded sections, and they represent a 1% reduction in output of the panels. So according to this, my system might have around a 5% reduction in efficiency based on nearby obstructions, which I think is good. I've no idea how that actually compares, but 95% efficiency I'm pretty happy with, especially given that the panels are on a south/southeast facing roof, which isn't the most ideal orientation to put it in. Now, they've also got a prediction on here on how much energy per day they think I'll generate, and then applied that average over each month of the year. So it's showing that the lowest is January and December at 3 kilowatt hours per day, and then peaking at around June at 16 kilowatt hours per day. Now, obviously, that's an average. There will be days that it'll do more, and there'll be days that it'll do a little bit less, but it's interesting to see what they think is achievable per day. Now, they've also shown what they think it will equate to as a reduction on my energy bill based on my usage, and it shows a 45% reduction, and that's an equivalent of £1,400 per year I'll be saving, which is very interesting indeed, especially when you remember what Ben said about the rate of return. That is so much higher than anything you could get with your money locked away with the pigeons in the bank vault. In fact, it's over double. I think the highest level of savings account at the moment is around 5%, and this works out to about 12% on the amount invested in the panels. Okay, sure, you're losing immediate capital, but given that you're making more money than if it was sat in a bank account, solar panels are actually looking like quite a strategic investment. And that's despite the high initial outlay. I guess if you're looking for a highest interest savings or highest interest return on your investment, then it's almost a no-brainer if you have that money sat around in a low-interest savings account. It just makes sense because that money can work for you, which is very interesting indeed. But call me convinced, because I decided right then to bite the bullet. I got straight on the phone to Ben and told him to book me in. I was about to become a member of the Solar Panel Owners Club. One cold January morning, a little digger turned up to start the installation of the heatable panels. Now, my installation is a little more complicated than your average build. I wanted the panels on the garage roof rather than the house roof, simply because this provides a really large surface to build a sleek looking system on. I also wanted the Powerwall 3 on the garage too. As sleek as it is, I wanted to keep the pathways around the house free from any more obstructions and to kind of keep the aesthetic of the house. That's it, the ground has been broken. And I'm a bit nervous because that is making a lot more mess than I anticipated it would do. As the digger got to work trenching the cable runs between the house and garage, stupidly I said I wanted to know more about the installation process, and I asked the team if they'd let me have a go at a few things.
There you go, come this side of the hook though.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. I don't want to let go of the thing. I don't want to let go of the handle.
There you go. Easy stuff.
Oh God.
Oh gosh.
Oh Jesus Christ. What have I done?
No, no.
I've broken a tile.
Uh-oh.
Some two. See this. Let me just. This is why I shouldn't have been in charge of that.
I should have probably stopped there as a sign of things to come, but me being me, I took things perhaps a little too far and decided that I didn't need any savings in my bank account. I just couldn't resist having a go on that digger.
I don't think that's supposed to happen.
Of course, I'd done the one thing that I probably wasn't supposed to do. I'd clipped the water main.
Where's that supply then? Or is that the supply to the house?
Yeah. So we're digging a trench for solar panel cabling, and I may or may not have just cut the mains. Yeah, oh. Thank you, mate. Cheers. See you in a bit. Bye, 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 bye. That is why I should never drive a digger again.
Thankfully, my plumber is an absolute legend and came out immediately to fix the pipe with a couple of zeros at the end of his invoice. But unfortunately, there's no fix for my idiocy. But after that mishap and several cups of tea, I thought I'd begin to pay a little more attention to what the Heatable team were getting up to, and I'm glad I did, because I couldn't believe the speed and professionalism that these guys were working at. And by the end of the first day, I'd been banned from helping out, and because of that, they were able to work much faster. All of the extensive cabling was in the ground, and the driveway had been put back almost exactly the way it was. Well, that is the end of day one. There's been a ton of stuff happened. All of the cable is now in the ground and been buried. That went down really quick, but my God, there is a lot of cabling. Powerwall is also bolted onto the garage over there, and that's currently being updated and plugged in. And we've also got all the brackets now on the roof ready for the panels tomorrow morning. But a ton of stuff has happened. The one thing that I've learned is that I should never ever be in charge of high powered machinery like a digger ever again. But putting that to one side, I think today has gone extremely well. So let's catch back tomorrow. The second day brought with it the installation of the panel system on the garage. The panels Heatable install are some of the best panels you can possibly get, for reasons I'll talk about later in the episode, but they're very much plug and play, which meant that it took a team of only 2 people to hoist them into position and install them by lunchtime. And after a quick test, a run through of the Powerwall 3 and a seal of certification from Heatable, and that was it. The team departed, leaving everything exactly how it was less than 2 days earlier, but with some shiny new panels that, despite the light fading into the afternoon, were already beginning to generate electricity. I was full of hope and looking forward to the next bit, taking a look at the numbers and seeing just how close Heatable were with their predictions, but to do that, it meant waiting a few months. So here we are back in the studio. Now, if you want to see more of that installation, Heatable actually filmed their own episode of STU'S Reviews whilst over installing the panels, and you can check out that episode at the links below. But it's now been 3 months since that installation, which I feel is enough time to get a good general feel for the system and some statistics to measure whether or not Heatable were right about their predictions or not. And let me tell you now, the results have been very interesting indeed. But before I show you those though, I want to briefly run through the actual technology that Heatable have installed, which will hopefully give some context to the results. So as Ben mentioned in my conversation with him, the panels that Heatable have currently installed are a 450 watt REA Fusion 2, and they are purposefully designed to be ultra efficient, and one of the ways in which they've increased efficiency is by making them bifacial. Now, this was something that I had no idea existed up until I started my research into solar panels, but what this means is that not only do they produce solar from the sun hitting the face of the panels, they'll also generate energy from the residual environmental light that hits them from the underside, which is a very clever idea to increase that efficiency. Supposedly, according to the internet, bifacial panels can increase efficiency up to 30%, depending on positioning and other factors, of course. But even if it adds an extra 5%, that's still a significant amount of additional energy generation over the course of an entire year. Now, another way this system is highly efficient is through the integrated microinverter on every single panel. These microinverters are the N-phase IQ8HC, which is a bit of jargon, but these are rated at 384 watt AC, making the Fusion 2 panels supposedly the most powerful integrated modules in the entire world. Now, the reason this helps with efficiency is that because each panel is essentially its own system, they all act independently. In many systems, panels are not independent, which means that when one is shaded or obstructed, the entire system slows down its production, basically restricting the system to only being as strong as its weakest performing panel. Now, Heatable's REA Fusion 2 system acts differently in that because the integrated microinverters, even if one panel were to be completely covered, the system would still work at maximum capacity for the other 9 remaining panels in my 10-panel system. A fact that I've come to realise was particularly important for me, and I didn't know it would be at the time of installation. Now, remember back on the report that Heatable sent at the start that showed the potential reduction in efficiency due to shade? Well, that's because on one side of the garage there's a very tall tree that overhangs the garage ever so slightly. Little did I know that just 2 weeks after the install, the rooks would take a liking to that tree and decide to make it their home for the nesting season. They turned my panels from a sleek-looking techno roof into this monstrosity overnight. But despite looking absolutely hideous, from a functional standpoint, it hardly impacted output because A, the fact the panels are bifacial and the birds couldn't possibly shit on the underside of the panels, and B, because they all work independently. The other 9 panels, which were much less impacted, were still able to operate at maximum capacity. If I'd had any other type of system without individual integrated microinverters, it would have grinded to a halt. So if that's not a selling point of those, I don't know what is. But I'll be taking a further look at this panel technology in the coming months. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to see a more in-depth stats on those panels over the summer. But the real question you're probably dying to know the answer to is how have they performed against Heatable's predictions? Were they spot on? Or were they inflating the stats to make the idea of panels more attractive? Well, for February, this was the first full month of using the panels. They predicted I would generate, on average, 6.1 kilowatt hours of energy per day, which is about £1.56 in current energy prices. The actual figures showed I generated on average 5.2 kilowatt hours per day for a total of 146 over the month and a value of £37.96, which means that Heatable were about 25 pence per day out with their prediction, which might not seem like a lot, but it's still £7 less over the month than I had anticipated based on the report. So it wasn't looking good. That wasn't until March. They predicted 10.6 kilowatt hours per day when I actually produced 13.1 kilowatt hours of energy per day for a total of 406 and £105.56 at current energy prices for the month, which is about 25% more than they predicted, which is wild. Now again, it's worth noting that there are so many variables in how much you can produce, like the weather, obstructions, trees, or having bird excrement cemented over several panels. But it's awesome to see that the predictions were far more conservative, certainly for March, than the system was actually able to output. So things were looking up for sure. And then we had April. I didn't really know what to expect here. Was it going to be higher like March or lower like February? Well, Heatable predicted a total of 14.4 kilowatt hours per day, and the final result was 16 kilowatt hours per day, equaling a total of 479.4 kilowatts and generated a value of £124.64. So again, we've exceeded the results that Heatable predicted by quite a lot. And it's great to know that based on the 3 months of full usage, Heatable were generally more conservative with their predictions rather than liberal with their numbers to get a quick sale. Now, I'll need to measure this over the entire year for a better data set comparison, and actually I might try and calculate their percentage accuracy for the system over a 12-month cycle. But right now, even after just a couple of months of use, they're exceeding my expectations massively. It's not just the panels, though, that have impressed me. I've got to make at least a small comment on the whole process, which has been so easy and smooth. Right from the offset, with the free planning software and quotation software, to the more advanced report that they sent through, and then the incredible care and dedication of the installation team, it's become quite apparent as to why Heatable has a 4.8 star rating out of 5 on Trustpilot for nearly 12,000 reviews. But will it continue to impress me? Because now that they've been installed, unless I get a problem with the panels or wish to extend the system, it'll be purely the energy generation statistics that will keep me happy or unhappy. So this is just the start of my journey with solar panels, which also means that the content isn't going to stop here. As I've already mentioned, in the coming months, I'll be doing a deep dive into the panels and comparing them with cheaper options so that you've kind of got an understanding of what and why is better. I'll be doing a review on the Powerwall 3 as well, and how this fits into my smart home system to save me even more money. And I'll also be taking a look at periodical stats under certain conditions. So if you enjoyed today's episode and want to see more solar content from me, make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe button. Oh, and if you do have any advice for me about how to make the most of my new panels, make sure you let me know in the comments below. It's a brave new world for me, and I need all the tips and advice I can get. But my tip for you, the one thing you absolutely must do after watching this episode, if you've been sat on the fence about solar, maybe you just want to find out what your house might be capable of generating with panels, or even if you already have solar panels and they aren't performing as well as you'd like, go and take a look at the Heatable website at the link below and run through that panel planner software yourself, just to see what you'll be able to achieve with a system using the REA Fusion 2 panels, because you might be very, very surprised at what you'll be able to achieve and how much it'll cost you. And then do the maths, because you may be like me and are able to generate enough electricity that the return on investment is far higher than that of any savings account out there. And if that is the case, then the only obvious thing to do is get solar panels. It doesn't make sense not to. But other than that, guys, thank you for joining this slightly different episode of STU'S Reviews. I do hope you enjoyed it, so let me know what you think in the comments below if you want to see this more kind of vlog and story-esque style. And I'll see you guys back for another episode soon.